Welcome back to Mosaic. If you're just joining us, we're discussing the Year of Mercy, which is going on now through November 20th. This was designated by Pope Francis back in last Lent. With me today is Father Mark Doherty, a priest for the Archdiocese of San Francisco. Father Mark, you just beautifully talked about what this Year of Mercy means for our universal church, the church around the world. Let's turn our attention more locally to our Archdiocese, which covers 3 counties, Marin, San Mateo, and San Francisco. I know a lot of churches and a lot of nonprofit organizations across the Bay Area, they're already living out the works of mercy. And they've been doing so for many years. But this year in particular, they're really doing more, as well as making an intentional effort to really engage more people in those works of mercy and invite people to not only experience mercy, but to share and extend that mercy to others. My own parish, Notre Dame des Victoires, here in San Francisco, just had a beautiful concert for Syrian refugees a couple weeks ago. That was fantastic. And I know a lot of the local nonprofits were getting together, joining forces to help the homeless with the El Nino and getting them socks and shoes and blankets and tarps. And it's just so much wonderful work is going on. And I'd love for us to talk a little bit more about some of these activities occurring here in the Archdiocese of San Francisco in an effort to live out this year most fully. And do you want to share some of the things that are happening here in the Archdiocese?
Yes, of course. I think the first thing to be said, of course, is when we speak about the more, when Pope Francis speaks about the more, what he's referring to is the magis, which is this famous Jesuit expression. Of course, Pope Francis is a Jesuit. The magis. God is always the magis. God is always the more. He's always going out further and further in an effort to do more, to express his love for his people. And so, of course, that becomes our mission, to do more. More doesn't mean reinventing the wheel, though. We know that as we look at Pope Francis's life experience, it's not as if when he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he was reinventing the wheel. He was instead taking a step back on occasion, looking around his community, his archdiocese in that case in Buenos Aires, and asking himself the question, are there particular communities, groups of people, particular individuals who are in special need of experiencing this loving touch of God? He would take a step back, take a look around, and then he'd engage. He'd go out, for example, to the barrios, to the poor sections of Buenos Aires, to the shanty towns, and he'd walk on foot through all these alleyways in an effort to meet the people out there who rarely had the chance to see a priest. So it's not so much a call to reinvent the wheel, it's a call to take a step back, to examine the situation, and re-engage with greater vigor. In my parish, for example, I think of our little neighborhood in the southeast part of the city, in the Mission District. We're on 24th Street in Alabama. That's where St. Peter's is. And then St. Anthony of Padua is on Cesar Chavez and Folsom. My pastor and I recently have taken a step back ourselves in response to this call of Pope Francis and asked ourselves, are there particular groups of people in our neighborhood who are in need of experiencing that mercy? And it became clear to us, in conjunction with the Missionaries of Charity, the Mother Teresa sisters who also work in our neighborhood, that of late there's a growing community of homeless people under the 101 freeway overpass there at Cesar Chavez and 101. So we thought, you know, here's a perfect opportunity in our local setting. We've taken a step back, we've looked around, we've noticed that there's a growing community of homeless people under the freeway there. So we've gathered together members of the parish, we've joined our efforts with the Missionaries of Charity, we formed a chapter of the St. Vincent de Paul Society, which is a perennial charitable organization of the church, and we have started going down to the freeway overpass in the afternoons, our parishioners primarily on Sunday afternoons. We've made the sandwiches, we've gone out there, we've met the people, we've engaged them. And through that work, what happens is we communicate to these folks that they matter, that they're worth it, that they belong, that they're members of the family, that they're loved by God, but not just by God, but by us also, that they're in our neighborhood, they're members of our neighborhood, and we care for them. That's a good example, I would say, of an effort to take a step back, re-engage, and do the magis, do the more. You can see examples, though, throughout the Archdiocese. You mentioned this initiative for Syrian refugees at Notre Dame des Victoires, your parish on Bush Street in San Francisco. We can look at the Gubbio project, which is at St. Boniface, where they host a shelter which of course is very important during the winter months. They've extended the hours. It's now a daytime shelter. And there's a cooperative venture between Catholic communities and other Christian communities and men and women of goodwill to give greater access to shelter space to those men and women and children who are in need of it. That's the Gubbio Project. I know that our Office of Restorative Justice is doing more and more now in an effort to rally around the families and the communities of victims who've suffered violence. Just this past year in my neighborhood, one of our young children was murdered a couple blocks from my church, and the Office of Restorative Justice was very helpful and constructive in helping to bring the community together. We would pray the rosary out there every night in an effort to pray, bring healing, and promote peace in the neighborhood. We have all sorts of initiatives in the diocese that are not necessarily new, but are taking seriously this call from Pope Francis to take a step back, examine the terrain, and re-engage with greater vigor. That's what we mean when we speak of the Magis.
Yeah, and there's so many ways that people here in the Bay Area can get involved in those.
That's right.
I know the Gubbio Project is always looking for people who can create meals, they can donate goods that are needed.
That's right.
And, you know, there's so many other ways. There's St. Vincent de Paul's having a book drive coming up across the Bay to provide literature as well. And there's just so many opportunities that people can engage in all of these wonderful works of mercy.
That's right.
Would you talk a little bit about, the Church often talks about the works of mercy and the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. Would you say what those are? And because there's also the spiritual aspect. People can pray and engage in this way as well.
That's right.
Would you talk about the difference between those and how people can engage in this year of mercy in that way?
Well, of course. So when we speak of the corporal works of mercy and the spiritual works of mercy, we're coming back again to this theme of the family. And it happens to be the case in our world, the way things are now, that here and there, at different moments, this or that member of the family is in particular need, either emotional need, spiritual need, or material need. When we speak of emotional need, I think, for example, of those family members who have experienced a loss, a death, for example, and they need the support of the community to come around and help them. Material need, we've spoken of the homeless. But it's always an effort to go out and find those members of the family who are particular in need at that moment and to speak to those needs, to respond to those needs in a loving and affectionate way.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll talk more about this and how you personally can engage in this year of mercy when we come back from this short break.